I watched a billionaire's fiancé slap a waitress and tear a manager's uniform while everyone stood frozen in fear. My daughter clutched my hand, terrified. Then memories of my cruel in-laws flooded back. I snapped. What I did next made the billionaire fall in love with me. I'm Naomi, and this is my story. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Trust me, you won't want to miss how this unfolds. This story has twists you won't see coming. A single mother's courage, a billionaire's choice, and revenge that will leave you speechless. Let's begin. My name is Naomi, and I'm 28 years old. I'm a single mother to the most beautiful 6-year-old girl in the world, my daughter Sophie. If you saw me on the street, you'd probably think I'm just another tired woman juggling too many responsibilities. And you'd be right. I work 2 jobs. One at a small cafe during the day and tutoring kids in the evening. It's exhausting, but it's my life, and I built it from nothing. 2 years ago, I lost my husband in a car accident. But honestly, I'd lost him long before that. Our marriage wasn't a fairy tale. It was survival. What made it unbearable wasn't even him, it was his family. My in-laws made my life a living nightmare from day one. They never accepted me because I came from a poor family. My mother-in-law would look at me with such disgust, like I was dirt she'd stepped in. She called me worthless, useless, garbage. Those words still echo in my mind sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep. The worst part? The physical abuse. She would slap me over the smallest things. Burnt toast. A wrinkled shirt. Sometimes for no reason at all, just to remind me of my place. She once tore my favorite dress right off my body because she said it was too cheap and embarrassed the family. My husband never defended me. He'd just look away, too afraid of his own mother. After he died, they didn't waste time. They threw Sophie and me out of the house within a week, said I brought bad luck, that I'd killed their son. Can you imagine hearing that while you're grieving? But I didn't break. I couldn't. I had Sophie. So I picked up the pieces, found a tiny apartment, and started over. Every single day has been a battle, but we've made it work. Sophie is happy, healthy, and that's all that matters. I promised myself I'd never let anyone treat me like garbage again. I'd never be silent again. That brings me to 3 months ago, to the night that changed everything. My best friend Lucy had been planning her birthday dinner for weeks. She insisted on taking me and Sophie to this fancy restaurant called La Lumière. I tried to refuse. Places like that cost more than I make in a week, but Lucy wouldn't hear it. She'd already made the reservation, already planned everything. She knew how hard I worked and wanted to give me one special evening. So I agreed, mostly for Sophie's sake. My little girl deserved to feel special too. The day of the dinner, Sophie was so excited. She wore her favorite yellow dress, the one with little flowers on it. I put on my only nice dress, a simple blue one I'd bought at a thrift store years ago. When we arrived at La Lumière, Sophie's face lit up like it was Christmas morning. The place was stunning, crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, soft piano music in the background. I felt out of place immediately, but watching Sophie's wonder made it worth it. We were seated at a nice table near the window. Lucy had invited 2 other friends, and we were all laughing, enjoying the moment. Sophie was telling everyone about her school project, her little hands gesturing excitedly. For the first time in months, I felt relaxed. I felt normal. Then everything changed. There was a commotion at the entrance. Heads turned, whispers rippled through the restaurant. A man walked in first. Tall, probably in his early 30s, wearing an expensive navy suit. He had dark hair and an air of confidence that came with money. But he seemed distracted, already pulling out his phone. Behind him came a woman who commanded attention like she owned not just the room but the entire world. She was stunning, I'll give her that. Late 20s, wearing a white designer gown that probably cost more than my car. Her jewelry sparkled under the lights. Everything about her screamed wealth and privilege, but there was something cold in her eyes, something cruel in the way her mouth was set in a permanent sneer. I learned later that her name was Clarissa Montgomery, and the man was Harrison Cole, a tech billionaire. They were engaged. The staff immediately went into panic mode. The hostess practically bowed as she led them to the best table in the restaurant. I watched as a young waitress, she couldn't have been more than 22, was assigned to serve them. The poor girl looked terrified. Her hands were already shaking as she approached their table with menus. Clarissa didn't even look at her, just snapped her fingers like she was calling a dog. I felt my stomach turn. The waitress, I later learned her name was Jenny, stood there waiting while Clarissa complained about everything. The table wasn't positioned right, the lighting was wrong, the temperature was too cold, nothing was good enough. Harrison just sat there on his phone, completely checked out. He didn't defend Jenny, didn't even seem to notice what was happening. Sophie tugged my sleeve. "Mommy," she whispered, "that lady is mean." "I know, baby," I whispered back. "Just ignore her." But ignoring her became impossible. Jenny brought their drinks, water and wine. Her hands were trembling so badly I could see it from our table. As she set down Harrison's water glass, her hand shook just a little too much. A few drops of water spilled onto the edge of the table, not on Clarissa, not on her dress, just on the table. A tiny puddle that could be wiped up in 2 seconds. Clarissa exploded. "You clumsy fool!" Her voice cut through the restaurant like a knife. Every conversation stopped. Every head turned. "Are you blind? Are you stupid?" Jenny's face went white. "I'm so sorry, ma'am. Let me clean that up right away." She didn't get to finish. Clarissa stood up and slapped Jenny across the face. The sound echoed through the silent restaurant. Jenny stumbled backward, her hand flying to her cheek, tears instantly springing to her eyes. I felt Sophie's entire body go rigid next to me. She grabbed my hand so tight it hurt. "You poor trash!" Clarissa's voice was filled with venom. "You people are only good for cleaning gutters. You're garbage!" Jenny was crying now, apologizing over and over, trying to clean up the water with shaking hands. Other staff members stood frozen, too terrified to intervene. The guests just watched, horrified but silent. No one wanted to get involved with someone like Clarissa Montgomery. A female manager rushed over. She was older, maybe in her 40s, wearing a neat uniform with a name tag that read, Patricia. She tried to calm Clarissa down, speaking in soothing, professional tones. She apologized profusely, tried to defend Jenny diplomatically, offered to personally handle their table for the rest of the evening. Clarissa turned on her like a predator who'd found new prey. "You hired this garbage?" Clarissa stepped closer to Patricia. "What kind of establishment is this? Do you know who I am?" Patricia tried to maintain her composure. "Ma'am, I assure you." Clarissa grabbed the collar of Patricia's uniform and yanked it violently. The fabric tore with a loud ripping sound. Patricia gasped, trying to hold her torn uniform together, her face flushed with humiliation. Tears welled in her eyes, but she fought to keep her professional mask in place. "You poor people are all the same," Clarissa hissed. "Useless garbage. Fire her right now or I'll make sure this restaurant is shut down by tomorrow morning." That's when something inside me broke. Or maybe it didn't break. Maybe it had been broken for years and was finally healing into something stronger. I was staring at Patricia's torn uniform, at Jenny's tear-stained face, at Clarissa's twisted expression of disgust. And suddenly, I wasn't in that restaurant anymore. I was back in my in-laws' house. I was watching my mother-in-law tear my dress. I was feeling her slap across my face. I was hearing her call me garbage, worthless, less than human. I was remembering every moment I'd stayed silent because I was too scared, too broken, too convinced that I deserved it. My hands started shaking, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was from rage. Sophie was crying quietly beside me, her face buried in Lucy's side. My little girl was terrified. She was watching another woman be treated the way her mother had been treated. And in that moment, I knew. I knew I couldn't let her see me stay silent. I couldn't teach her that this was acceptable, that people like us just had to take it. Lucy grabbed my arm. "Naomi, don't. She's dangerous. She has power." I stood up anyway. My legs felt like they might give out, but I walked toward that table. Every step felt like I was walking through water, but I didn't stop. Clarissa was still yelling at Patricia, still demanding that Jenny be fired. She raised her hand, about to strike Jenny again. I grabbed her wrist mid-air. Clarissa's head whipped around, her eyes wide with shock. For a moment, she was too stunned to speak. I held her wrist firmly, then twisted it backward, not enough to injure her, but enough that it hurt. Enough that she knew I wasn't afraid. "Let go of me!" Clarissa shrieked, trying to pull away. "How dare you touch me?" My voice came out steady, cold. "That's enough. You've done enough." Clarissa's face turned purple with rage. "Do you know who I am? I'll destroy you. I'll sue you. I'll make sure you never work anywhere in this city again." "I don't care who you are," I said quietly. "You don't get to treat people like garbage." The restaurant was dead silent. Every single person was watching us. I could feel their eyes, their held breath, their shock that someone, especially someone like me, would dare confront Clarissa Montgomery. Clarissa wrenched her arm free and raised her hand to slap me. I saw it coming. I'd been slapped enough times to recognize the motion, but this time I didn't flinch. This time I caught her wrist again. And then I did something I never thought I'd do. Something that went against every instinct that had been beaten into me over the years. I slapped her back. The sound echoed through the restaurant. Clarissa stumbled backward, her hand flying to her cheek, her mouth open in absolute shock. She looked like she couldn't comprehend what had just happened. No one had ever dared to touch her, to fight back. You, she sputtered, unable to form words. "Call the police," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. "Please, let's call them right now. Let's show them Jenny's face where you hit her. Let's show them Patricia's torn uniform. There are 50 witnesses here who saw everything." Clarissa looked around wildly. For the first time, she seemed to realize that every single person in that restaurant was looking at her with disgust. Not admiration, not fear. Disgust. I kept talking. The words poured out of me like they'd been trapped for years. "You called them garbage? Let me tell you something about garbage. I've been called that. I've been slapped. I've had my clothes torn off me. By people just like you who think money makes them gods." My voice cracked, but I pushed through. "But we're not garbage. We're human beings. We work hard. We survive things you couldn't imagine. We're stronger than you'll ever be because we've had to be. You're just cruel. And cruelty isn't strength, it's weakness." The silence that followed was deafening. Then, slowly, someone started clapping. A woman at a nearby table. Then another person joined, and another. Within seconds, half the restaurant was applauding. Some people were standing up. Clarissa's face went from red to white. She looked around desperately, searching for support and finding none. Then she turned to Harrison, who had finally put down his phone and was watching everything with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Harrison!" Clarissa ran to him, her voice taking on a pleading tone. "Did you see what she did? She assaulted me. Call your lawyers. Have her arrested." Harrison stood up slowly. He looked at Clarissa for a long moment. Then he looked at Jenny, still holding her face, at Patricia, clutching her torn uniform, at me, standing there shaking but defiant, at Sophie, peeking out from behind Lucy with tear-stained cheeks. "No," he said quietly. Clarissa blinked. "What?" "No," Harrison repeated, louder this time. He turned to Jenny and Patricia. "I apologize. What you experienced tonight is unacceptable. No one should be treated that way." He pulled out his wallet and handed Patricia several bills. I couldn't see the amount, but Patricia's eyes went wide. "For your uniform and your dignity." Then he turned to Jenny and did the same. "For the assault. And you will not lose your job. I'll make sure of it." Then Harrison turned back to Clarissa. His voice was cold, controlled. "We're done." "What are you talking about?" Clarissa's voice went shrill. "The engagement is over. I'm done. I've watched you treat people like this for months, and I looked the other way because our families are connected, because it was convenient. But I can't anymore. I won't." "Harrison, you can't be serious." "I've never been more serious." He pulled a ring box from his pocket. Apparently Clarissa hadn't even been wearing her engagement ring, and set it on the table. "This woman," he gestured to me, "is a complete stranger. But she had more courage in 5 minutes than I've had in 6 months. She reminded me what real strength looks like, what real character looks like. Clarissa's face twisted with rage and humiliation. "You'll regret this. Your family will understand when I show them the footage from the security cameras." Harrison gestured to the cameras mounted in the corners. "You assaulted 2 employees in front of dozens of witnesses. I'm not just ending our engagement, I'm pressing charges." The security guards were already approaching. Harrison nodded to them. "Please escort Miss Montgomery out, and someone call the police. I'd like to file a formal complaint for assault and battery." Clarissa screamed as they led her away. She threatened lawsuits, ruin, destruction. But her voice faded as they took her outside. The moment she was gone, the entire restaurant seemed to exhale collectively. I realized my legs were shaking so badly I might fall. Harrison approached me carefully, like he was afraid I might bolt. I probably looked like I might. "Are you okay?" he asked. I nodded, though I wasn't sure it was true. "Is Sophie—" Lucy had brought Sophie over. My little girl wrapped her arms around my waist. "Mommy, you were so brave." Harrison knelt down to Sophie's level. "Hi there, I'm Harrison. Your mom is the bravest person I've met in a very long time." Sophie smiled shyly at him, then buried her face in my side again. Harrison stood and looked at me, really looked at me. "Would you mind if I joined you for a few minutes? I'd like to talk." I glanced at Lucy, who looked just as stunned as I felt, then back at Harrison. "Okay." We sat down at my table. Harrison ordered hot chocolate for Sophie and coffee for the rest of us. And then we talked. He asked about my life, and I found myself being honest. I told him I was a single mom, that my husband had died, that I worked 2 jobs, that life was hard but we were making it. I didn't tell him about my in-laws. Not yet. That felt too raw, too personal. Harrison listened in a way that felt genuine. He told me he felt trapped in his life, surrounded by people like Clarissa who only cared about appearances and power, that he'd forgotten what real conversations felt like, what real people felt like. Before he left, he insisted on paying for our entire meal and left a $1,000 tip for the staff. He gave me his card. "If Clarissa tries to retaliate against you, and she might, please call me. I'll make sure you're protected." I took the card, not really believing I'd use it, but 3 days later, I got fired from my cafe job. The manager told me someone had called claiming I'd assaulted a customer and stolen money. It was obviously a lie, but the cafe couldn't risk the bad publicity. I knew it was Clarissa. Then rumors started spreading. People I'd never met were posting about me online, calling me violent, unstable, a gold digger trying to trap a billionaire. The stories were ridiculous, but some people believed them. I called Harrison. I hated asking for help, but I was desperate. I had rent to pay, Sophie to feed. He answered on the first ring. Within 24 hours, everything changed. Harrison's legal team contacted the cafe with evidence of Clarissa's false report. The manager called me, apologizing profusely, begging me to come back with a raise. I declined. I had my pride, but accepted the severance payment they offered. Harrison's team also went after Clarissa. Turns out his company had major contracts with her family's business. Harrison pulled every single one, millions of dollars in losses. The Montgomery family was furious, but the security footage from the restaurant had already gone viral online. The hashtag #JusticeForJenny was trending. Clarissa's reputation was destroyed. But Harrison did something else too. He offered Jenny and Patricia better positions at his company's headquarters. Better pay, better treatment. They both accepted. As for the false rumors about me, Harrison's PR team shut them down with facts and more security footage showing exactly what happened. Within a week, public opinion had completely shifted. People were calling me brave, a hero. It was overwhelming. Harrison started showing up at my apartment, not to pressure me, just to talk. He'd bring coffee, sometimes pastries for Sophie. He'd sit at my tiny kitchen table and ask about my day like it mattered, like I mattered. One evening, about 3 weeks after the restaurant incident, I finally told him about my in-laws, about the abuse, the cruelty, how they'd thrown me out. Harrison's jaw tightened as he listened. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "You're the strongest person I've ever met. And if they ever bother you again, they'll answer to me?" I believed him. 2 weeks later, there was a knock on my door. I opened it to find my former mother-in-law and father-in-law standing there with fake smiles plastered on their faces. "Naomi, darling," my mother-in-law cooed. "We've missed you so much." I felt sick. "What do you want?" "We were wrong," my father-in-law said smoothly. "We should have treated you better. Your family. Come back to us." I knew exactly what this was about. They'd seen the news, seen me with Harrison. They wanted access to his money. "No," I said simply, starting to close the door. My mother-in-law pushed forward. Now, let's not be hasty. Think about Sophie. She deserves to know her grandparents." "You threw us out," I said, my voice shaking. "You called me garbage. You hit me. You told me I killed your son. We were grieving." "Get out." They tried to push their way in. That's when Harrison appeared in the stairwell. He'd been coming to visit and had perfect timing. "Is there a problem?" His voice was cold. My in-laws turned, saw him, and their faces lit up with greed. My mother-in-law tried to turn on the charm. "Oh, you must be Harrison. We've heard so much." "I know who you are," Harrison cut her off. "Naomi told me everything, how you abused her, how you threw her and your granddaughter onto the street." My father-in-law tried to speak, but Harrison held up a hand. "Leave, now. If you ever contact Naomi or Sophie again, you'll be hearing from my lawyers. I'll make sure you're charged with harassment. Do you understand?" They left, humiliated and angry, but they left. After they were gone, I broke down crying. Harrison held me while I sobbed, all the pain and fear from those years finally pouring out. He didn't try to fix it. He just stayed. Over the next few months, Harrison became part of our lives. He took us to simple places, parks, ice cream shops, museums. He helped Sophie with her homework. He made us laugh. He never tried to buy us with his money. He just showed up, consistently, genuinely. Sophie started calling him Uncle Harrison. Then, one day, she asked if he could be her daddy instead. 6 months after that night in the restaurant, Harrison took Sophie and me to the beach. While Sophie built sandcastles, he turned to me. "Naomi, I've met a lot of people in my life. Powerful people, rich people, famous people, but none of them had what you have. Real courage, real strength, real heart. I don't just love you. I love the life you've built, the daughter you're raising, the woman you are." He pulled out a simple, elegant ring. "Will you marry me? Will you let me be Sophie's father?" Sophie came running over, covered in sand. "Say yes, Mommy." I looked at this man who'd seen me at my worst and stayed, who'd protected me, who'd loved Sophie like she was already his, who'd shown me that not all people with power used it to hurt. "Yes," I whispered. We got married 3 months later in a small ceremony. Sophie was the flower girl. Jenny and Patricia were there. Lucy was my maid of honor. It was simple and perfect. As for Clarissa, I heard her family's business collapsed. She moved abroad somewhere, trying to escape the scandal. I don't think about her much anymore. I finished my degree with Harrison's support. I started a nonprofit to help women escaping abusive relationships. Jenny opened her own catering business. Patricia became a general manager. We all moved forward. Sometimes Sophie asks me about that night in the restaurant. She's 8 now, and she remembers. I tell her the truth. Standing up for what's right is scary, but staying silent is scarier. That no one has the right to treat you like garbage, no matter how much money or power they have. That you are worthy of respect, of love, of dignity, always. My life now isn't perfect, but it's mine, and it's beautiful. If this story moved you, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Have you ever stood up for someone when everyone else stayed silent? Share your story in the comments below. I read every single one. Your words might inspire someone today who's struggling to find their voice. Subscribe for more real-life stories that prove kindness and courage can change everything. Until next time, remember, you are not garbage. You are strong. You are worthy. Your story isn't over. Sometimes the worst moments lead to the best chapters. This is Naomi, reminding you that your voice matters. Use it. See you in the next one.